Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to welcome you all to this launch town hall from the UK CEiRSI, or Centre of Excellence on In-Silico Regulatory Science and Innovation, for our pilot phase. And I'm delighted to be joined here with a number of colleagues and also funders and sponsors from this project as we will present in the next few minutes. So a few points of housekeeping that Lara will present.
Yeah,
colleague here from Manchester.
Yeah, so if you could kindly submit any questions using the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, we should be able to address any questions at the end of the webinar, or we'll be in touch with you if you have any further questions that aren't covered in the webinar. I'd like to mention that the session's being recorded and that the meeting recording will be shared via YouTube following the webinar. And if you have any further queries following the meeting, please get in touch with us at ukcersi@manchester.ac.uk.
Thank you. Just checking, Jeff, is your hand a genuine hand? Okay.
No, it was not. Sorry, Alex.
That's okay. No worries. So you will be provided now. So if you could all either use the QR code, or Lara is likely to put now in the chat also the URL. There is a tool that we have put together for you to be able to provide feedback to us throughout the session, either based on what you see today, or if you have been connected to some of our communication channels on areas that you would like us to work more of what we're doing, or areas where you think that are covered by other parts of the ecosystem and you think that we should be focused less on those, and also in general what areas we could be working or doing differently. And also please use one of the post-its to add into the corresponding boxes with your suggestions, and if you want, leave us your contact and we'll make sure that we come back to you as well. So I'm joined with a number of colleagues and we will be introducing them as we go, but Lara and myself both are from the University of Manchester, and I'm the coordinator of the CEiRSI, and Lara is project officer here in the group. So without further ado, we will start the session by two very brief presentations or brief comments from Nika Spikarnell from Innovate UK and Harriet Thierry from MHRA, who represent one of the two funders of this initiative, and MHRA, who is very closely working with us in it. So thank you. Nick.
And hi, everyone. So I'll just explain a bit of the background to this competition, of which this network is one of the successful ones to emerge from that. Just to set a bit of the context and sort of Innovate UK's interest and role in this space. So as you know, regulation has the power to accelerate innovation by providing confidence to investors and innovators and certainty for investors, and also to help boost consumer confidence. And with cutting-edge innovations increasingly challenging traditional regulatory remits, the UK has this unique and very sort of important opportunity to lead that global push towards more agile, proportionate regulatory system to help regulate innovation. The tremendous potential of the regulatory frameworks as a lever to stimulate innovation has been recognised by successive governments. This is epitomised in the current government's commitment to this agenda through the establishment of the Regulatory Innovation Office in October last year, which is an office within the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology to drive reforms to the regulatory system to support the rapid introduction of the most impactful innovations. So Innovate UK's specific role in this policy area, well, our 2021 Plan for Action, which is our kind of current strategic guiding document in force at the minute, committed us to supporting the government in its work of using regulatory levers to stimulate and support UK business innovation through regulatory reform. This was followed up in our 2022 Strategic Delivery Plan, which established a more concrete ambition to set up a series of regulatory science and innovation networks. So these would be networks of expertise in regulatory science that generate and drive research-based evidence and insight, contributing to the creation of a more pro-innovation regulatory environment and smarter policy to achieve those objectives, ultimately for the benefit of UK businesses, consumers, and society more widely. So in terms of the process of developing this concept, it obviously drew on important international examples, such as in the US, the Food and Drug Administration Centers of Excellence in Regulatory Science and Innovation, but also organizations like the Regulatory Science Network in the Netherlands. But ultimately, this concept represents something of a unique sort of game-changing opportunity for the UK in the UK context, especially because it's defined by its specific focus on innovation and the interests of innovators in thinking about the potential of regulatory science. So in terms of the timeframes from this program, this was a two-stage competition. We had an initial discovery phase, which was 6 months from March to August last year, in which we accepted applications for ideas to explore the feasibility and viability of a regulatory science network in their particular innovation area. That was followed by a secondary implementation phase competition, which would award 1 year's worth, 12 months of funding to successful networks to emerge from that competitive process. And this network was one of those that was succeeded in securing that funding to do so. Originally, the plan had been to run this as a single sort of cross-sectoral competition, but through our partnership with the MHRA and the Office for Life Sciences, we were unable to unlock an additional £6.5 million worth in funding to support a dedicated competition stream focused on human health applications, which we badged Centres of Excellence in Regulatory Science and Innovation, which were ultimately about supporting policy development to advance an efficient and effective regulatory system for medicines and medical device development, approvals, safety and performance monitoring, and similar. So ensuring that the evidence generated by these centres would be supporting MHRA in its important work as regulating in this sector. So that's kind of in a nutshell how the competition structure and where Innovate UK's role in achieving that objective. Obviously, the funding awards are for 1 year, and we hope our commitment is to explore ways of upscaling this programme through the evidence generated by these networks and centres, and welcoming the fantastic opportunity they have to kind of transform the innovation in the sectors in which they operate. So I'll hand over to Harriet to discuss this more from the MHRA context as well. So over to you, Harriet.
Thanks, Nick. And it's been a really great partnership between ourselves, OLS, Innovate UK, and most recently MRC to get this up and running. And it is a first of its kind in the UK, and we are really excited to learn from the programmes, to gather the evidence that is developed through it to help engage and to inform our future regulatory needs, because that is the driver from our perspective in these centres being up and running. It feels like it's taken a little bit of time to get to this point, but we're now in a position where 7 CEiRSI have been set up and are underway, and across the next almost 12 months we're going to be engaging with them as the project unfolds and learning from your findings. So from our perspective, it's a really exciting point to have reached. And we are just really looking forward to engaging with you and hearing how it progresses from here. In the background, we'll be looking to coordinate across the 7 so that we can share learnings across the different projects and project areas, and then also thinking about how we sustain this programme beyond this initial 12 months. But I'm delighted that this is starting and that you're all here, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how we get on.
Super, thanks a lot, Harriet, and I think you would be both pleased with Nick to hear also that some of the centres we have been already in contact and started to explore where we can complement each other. So this has been really a fantastic opportunity as well for us. So so what I will do now is I'll try to set a bit of stage about why we need a CEiRSI on in-silico methods in particular, and also why now is the right moment to do it. And we also will specifically cover both our ambitions before the next, beyond the 12 months, but also more specifically what we plan to do in the next 12 months. And during my presentation, I will introduce some of the colleagues that are working with me in this project, because it's a very large consortium and initiative. So I titled this section, the UK CEiRSI, what is our vision and what we consider are the ethical and economic imperatives to develop this program. So most of you will know that in the healthcare space, developing a new technology, whether a new product, whether it is a device or it's a drug, is a massive endeavor, and that the ways in which we know something about these products today is based, whether it is on safety or it is from efficacy, is primarily around the use of bench, animal, and human testing. And this is most of the scientific foundations about how we deliver regulatory evidence, or more broadly, how we develop those products, and evidence for the R&D process is predicated on these three avenues, three fronts to come to understanding of them. But the question that we want to pose to all of you today is: are they really so good as we think they are? Are there things that we could improve? So for a starter, we have really a problem of lengths. I mean, developing those products is a 13-year exercise if you're thinking about devices, and it's a 14 to 16 years exercise if you're thinking in terms of drugs. And this means that creating new life-saving technologies is time-consuming. There are also limitations, let's say methodological limitations in each of these approaches. And something that we also need to recognize, all three of them are models, ways that we simplify the world to actually try to come to a better understanding in control conditions. And I'm not going to go through all of the details, but just to pick one from each of those, is complex in a bench test to replicate, for instance, complex interactions between the biology and the physical aspects. In animal testing, there is differences in anatomy, physiology, genetics between different species, and in human trials, there are sometimes ethical, logistics, and challenges that not always allow us to run a randomized controlled trial or a human trial in general. And then, of course, we are not going to get into the fact that, as anything, including the approaches we are going to propose, there are ways of doing them wrong, and that there is not always good science that is published. So, but the other important element is, how are we doing in terms of patient safety? And there's a number of studies that have actually shown, like the implant files or the Cumberledge report and others, that we are, as a system, internationally failing to deliver the best possible therapies to patients in a safe and prompt manner. So this is something that we need to reflect upon. And it's not only that we have an ethical imperative in the use of these products once they go to market, but even the same process of developing the evidence is fraught with challenges and with risks. So, for instance, we know that from every 100 devices that actually enter into a clinical testing pipeline, about 30 of them will eventually end up with an FDA clearance, for instance, in the US. And that about 41% of in the study that we are basing these statistics, 41% of the patients that were exposed to devices that were investigational will remain having investigational devices for the rest of their life. So those products will not get to market. And if you look in drugs, this is about 5 drugs in every 100 that come out of the testing pipeline, and it's about 68% of all the participants in that trials will remain having been administered drugs that will remain being investigational. And someone was asking in a recent event how that's what that happened from those that eventually get to market, how many of them remain in market after a few years, and that's yet another attrition rate. And also, most of the challenges about evidencing, all of the challenges that are identified in this space come sometimes in very early phases of the process of testing, sometimes in late phases. So they are distributed along the whole pipeline. There are also aspects that are related to the cost and the logistical implications of patient involvement in trials. And many of these, many of the trials in humans have challenges regarding retention of those patients after a certain period of time. There is also many of the trials that fail to meet the recruitment timelines or targets, and we know that in many geographies, there are, in one way or another, different ethnicities or groups of patients that are underrepresented, and they're not, in a sense, they're not taken into account in the evidence that is produced. So there are problems about representativeness of that evidence as well. And then if we look at the cost from a company point of view, there is massive risk in this process. So I'm showing here a pipeline for a complex medical device. A complex medical device is on average a 54 million endeavor. And if you incorporate all the capitalization costs and the failures to get to that device, is about 10 times that initial cost. And we have a number of pain points where the probability of success remains importantly low. And both for devices and for drugs, there is almost a 90% attrition rate at the end of the process. So that all of those costs, either from failure or from the lengthy R&D, ends up being rolled up in the cost of the device or the drug when it's marketed. And this is why this also adds additional tensions to the healthcare systems. Now, from a UK point of view, there is, this comment so far, in every geography, but if we actually want to develop in our country a place where different companies want to locate themselves here, want to come and do studies and produce regulatory evidence, so that citizens within the UK have access to life-saving technologies, but also that access is predicated on evidence that is close to home and relates to our demographics, we need to create a very attractive environment, not only for science, but also for innovation and regulation. And we have evidence as well, economic evidence, showing that medical devices tend to, and drugs tend to go to trials elsewhere, where either the costs are lower or where there is more clarity about the regulatory pathways. And this is one of the aspects that all of the CEiRSIs want to address, but in particular, we want to look as well. Now, how do we go from this first do not harm to, a better situation that we have at the moment? And we call this simulation first. So we believe that there is a number of challenges that we need to build upon and turn them into opportunities. And in particular, what we are looking is at the use of modeling and simulation technologies, or in-silico technologies more generally, as a way to obtain either research and innovation evidence or regulatory evidence that can help us to advance with more confidence and de-risk both patients and investments, and deliver eventually better products. So this is what we do with these technologies, or in-silico technologies, which is all about creating computer-based tests or trials that usually represent very detailed, have very detailed prediction models. Some of them can be data-driven, but there is an important amount of those that are mechanisms-driven, that test those products in very controlled conditions and in virtual cohorts that represent operational regimes similar to the ones we will have in our intended populations. So what we are suggesting is not that we need to not use the other sources of evidence, but that there is actually a much more complete set of tools that, in addition to human, animal, and bench testing, incorporate the ability of using computers and virtual populations of patients, and that we should be using all of those, this complete set, for both getting the best possible evidence at the end, but also for how we de-risk every single stage along the way. And specifically, at least in the foreseeable future, we don't anticipate in-silico technologies to fully eliminate the need of regular trials. But what we do want is to proceed only to trials, to human trials, or to bench testings there and animal testing there, where we have other sources of evidence that give us sufficient confidence that that is worthwhile. And with that, we're going to focus the resource and the risk, those investments, the risk patients, reduce animal harm, and reduce also the need of the production of waste through those tests. So this is what we illustrate here. So in the horizontal axis, what you have is a whole life cycle of a medical product. In the vertical axis, you have the number of problems that we need to resolve in a particular design of a product. And what we tend to do nowadays is we tend to freeze fairly quickly our design space, and then we go through the whole pipeline to then find later on that actually there are problems with our designs. What we want to look is at ways in which we can do early testing in a more inexpensive manner, in a way that can be done in a more thorough and systematic way, so that we actually can discard wrong leads to products early on. So by the time we come to animal testing, we can do that, as I said, with confidence and also with reduced cost and risk. Now, is this working? Well, there are a number of case studies out there that have looked, for instance, to the fact that with these sort of technologies, you can go about 2 years earlier to market. Industry, what is telling us is that more important, almost a reduction in cost, is the acceleration of going earlier to market, because there are advantages in being a first mover. There are advantages about recovering your investment earlier on. You can also reduce the number of human subjects that are required, and have studies where you have both human subjects and virtual patients in joint arms. And also we can reduce, as a consequence, the cost of those trials because of the reduction in number of patients. And also by having gone earlier on to market, you can increase the sales during that period, which also helps you to recover the cost earlier as well. So we want to focus a bit now in the journey that we did. So Nick explained a bit from the perspective of Innovate UK. Now from the perspective of our specific center, we started about 3 years ago. And initially as a grassroots effort through the In-Silico UK network, which has now nearly 3,500 members. And we have a Slack workspace where people can communicate and interact. We went through the discovery phase, so we've done already quite a lot of work, but that helped before the discovery phase. But that helped us to sort of round our thinking and bring additional partners. And now we're running this pilot phase that comes from the design of those 3 years of previous work. And then later on, my colleague John Holden will also explain some of the work that the CEiRSI will do, looking at the full, future implementations beyond the next 12 months. So that's the way we came to this center. And what we are trying to do as computational modelers is really work towards ways to reduce the exposure to patients to unproven therapies, reduce costs to the ecosystem, and also help to improve both the quality of the products that are produced and reduce failures after products have been marketed. Now, we come to this point and to the design based on a number of thought leadership work that we've done. So we developed a roadmap that was published back in 2023 and has now over 3,000 downloads. We also worked together with MHRA about, again, 2 years ago, and we had a joint event together with a number of partners from other agencies, including HSC, FSA, OPRS. So there's a number of other regulators and healthcare partners that were part, each of them sharing their experience about how they use modeling and simulation. And it turns out that actually is more used than perhaps you may imagine, but that there are a number of different ways of using and lessons that we can learn from each other. We also developed more recently a sort of a more snappier version that was published together with KPMG in a report. And more recently, we have initiated, in addition to sort of communities of interest like In-Silico UK, other mechanisms like a podcast that is actually more targeting to the general lay persons, that where we try to sort of examine different publications and the evidence and take as well advice from the conversations we have with our PPIE group to develop areas where we can help to sort of disseminate and demystify some of these technologies as well. So through all of this exercise, what we have identified is that during a period of 2 to 3 years of sustained investment, it's possible to reach to a position where we will have more clarity about the positioning of in-silico evidence within the regulatory pathways. We have some actions of things that we need specifically to do in that space. We also we need to develop better confidence on the in silico evidence, particularly through developing best practices and emphasizing the work in standards and case studies, which is something we have started doing. There is a big area as well around shortage of regulatory skills, both in regulators and in regulatory affairs colleagues in industry, and that there is a need to actually add and future-proof sort of that capability. And finally, that unlike in the US, where there are certain parts of FDA that have represent technical capabilities in support for regulators, that a similar body like that doesn't exist, and that's precisely the space that we think the CEiRSI should take. So what are we going to do specifically over the next 12 months? So we're going to run. We took one of those actions, in particular the growing and developing further credibility, and use it as a centerpiece for articulating some of the other lessons and areas of learning that I mentioned before. So in particular, the ERLOC initiative, or In-Silico Regulatory ERLOC, is a safe space where industry, academia, regulators, and lay people will interact through a sequence of problem-based learnings, a sequence of case studies and pilots, to actually understand what are the challenges and the hindrances to develop this technique at the moment. We will take some of the lessons learned from other geographies, and in particularly some of the recent documents produced by FDA around credibility assessment, and we will test those and also develop a position paper that is going to provide advice and a set of recommendations and reflections to MHRA for them to consider potentially developing some guidance based on that material. And we're going to do that in co-creation work together with MHRA, but also NICE and the Health Research Authority. So our structure has fundamentally 4 work packages. And rather than me telling all you about this, I'm going to explain work package 0, and then I will call some of my colleagues to introduce themselves. So these are the colleagues who are leading in each of the work packages and introduce themselves, give a bit about their background, and explain you what the plan is in their work package, what are the main things we're going to be doing in there. And then I will follow up with some additional material. So in work package 0, and I'm going to call both Mark Rumbridge and Andrea Manfrin to join me on the stage and to make themselves visible, connecting the video. So this is the group that will provide an oversight of the whole initiative, and we will be meeting regularly to sort of make sure that all the bits and pieces are connecting each other. But at the same time, we're going to produce this position paper that I mentioned before. And I'm going to hand over now to Andrea and Mark to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. Can you hear me properly?
That's very good.
Excellent. Thank you. So it is an absolute privilege to work with you and be part of the CEiRSI initiative. So my name is Andrea Manfrin. I'm a pharmacist by training. And at the MHRA, I joined the MHRA in June 2023, and my role at the MHRA is a Deputy Director of Clinical Investigations and Trials. Clinical investigations is Mark territory, so I'm not going to deep dive into it because Mark will really zoom on it. But we have 3 teams working together: clinical investigation, which is the equivalent of devices; clinical trials means drugs or medications; and clinical investigations and trial operation, which is our machinery, the data analysis, the flow, the workflow, and the intelligence in our activity. So what we do what we say regulatory review. So we assess the safety of the protocol of the submission before approval. My perspective is that this initiative is a groundbreaking one, and as we mentioned before already, we understand that there is a huge potential in this, but the potential probably will be released in stages, and potentially the first step will be that the in-silico trial will become a supporting type of activity alongside the normal trials. But there is a lot of scope in it, and as we already discussed during the previous webinar, there is a lot of interest from the clinical side and the clinical pharmacology side as well, because we have a a team of people using computer model simulation within the agency. Therefore, working together will enhance our understanding and ability to better assess this type of trial. And by working together, I'm sure that we will create a successful environment for the future of clinical trial in the UK. And I'm hand over to Mark now.
Thanks, Andrea. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Grumbridge, and I'm Head of Clinical Investigations at MHRA. I'm a nurse by background. I'm still a registered nurse, and I've worked at MHRA for 13 years and been Head of the Clinical Investigations team for the last 3. I think my personal involvement in this initiative stems from interest in all sorts of things that are different, because we do have run-of-the-mill processes and procedures. But this is a very interesting project that we're keen to get on board with, and that's why we're here today to support this. I think when I look at the way we process clinical investigations for medical devices at the moment, it is something that is well versed and well understood by the agency. So one of the things that comes from this project is that enhanced learning, not just for me, not just for my team, but for the rest of the agency as well, and the stakeholders involved. If I was to pick one single thing where I think that clinical investigations currently fall down, it's around recruitment, because the number of studies that I see that close early because of poor recruitment. And I think sometimes poor recruitment is based on poor patient information and consent. So I think for In-Silico, and Andrea's already mentioned the Health Research Authority, and they are managing ethics committees, I think it's going to be really important around the patient information and consent aspects of In-Silico studies, because I say on many, many occasions, and I said it again last week, that I have no concerns over the way technology is moving and how quick it's moving. Where there is a concern is recruitment into these studies, because of the reasons that I've mentioned, that you have a patient information sheet that explains to the patient, probably in 25 or 26 pages in some situations, what's expected of them. But there are failures there, because we talk about devices, we never show the patient the device that we're talking about, for example. So it's really important that we do have the input from Health Research Authority from an ethics perspective, from the patient information and consent side of things as well, because if you can't get a patient to sign on the dotted line, then in theory you have no study. In terms of potential fixes that we need to do, I think there's, as I said, there's a training requirement for the whole of the agency that's involved in clinical investigations. We have a huge software team, and they're constantly developing guidance, and I think this is another area that they will get involved in. In terms of the benefits, then in terms of normal studies, then we see, for example, we know that heart valves are involved in this project, that we normally see a heart valve study where participants are expected to be in that study for sometimes up to 5 years, and it's a huge burden on a participant. So anything that reduces burden on participants from the time that they're in a study can only be welcomed. I think in terms of the animal testing, that's a very controversial area for a lot of participants. The patient safety aspects are really important, because what we're actually looking at is the safety and performance of devices that come to market with In-Silico data. So we need to be really clear about that, what is acceptable. We know about the risks of software, we know about the risks of cybersecurity, etc. So all those areas, need to be addressed to provide that reassurance, not just for the regulator, but also for potential participants as well. So there are challenges, but I think it's safe to say that we're up for the challenge. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to both of you. I'm going to invite now Jeff Bishop. And I don't know if Mark is as well, Mark Horniger, but both of them are co-leading Work Package 1, and I think Jeff will briefly introduce us what we're planning to do there. Thank you, Jeff.
Hi, thanks, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Bischoff. I work with Zimmer Biomet, which is a med tech company focused primarily around musculoskeletal issues. So I come into the CEiRSI as someone who's been working aggressively and passionately in the space of devices at the intersection of modeling over the past 2 decades or so. So within the CEiRSI, within this first committee, I am one of the two co-chairs, so happy to serve this role on behalf of the effort. As Alex mentioned, Mark Horner from ANSYS is the lead. He's not able to join today, but he and I will be working together to make sure all the efforts of this committee go as we hope that they will. So what we hope to do is we have a committee of over 30 people from a variety of academic, industry, regulatory, and other sectors who are coming together to build a handful of essentially thought experiments around what level of credibility is needed to support a lot of the different interesting aspects and emerging aspects of simulation that we envision throughout the whole product life cycle, whether we're talking about devices or drugs or other applications. And so it can range from preclinical in silico evaluations of devices as we think about design optimization, things along those lines. It can advance to definitive verification and validation activities around new interventions, drugs, devices, software, whatever the case might be, and even out to supporting post-market surveillance. So how can we use simulation to support data that we get currently through clinical studies to help manage clinical studies? So we have a total of 10 different pilots that we're going to be working on during the course of the calendar year. Between essentially now and early fall, you'll see a sprinkling of webinars similar to this, where each of these 10 pilots will take the chance to talk about the problem. Why is this an interesting case study? And then what are some of the challenges to using model and simulation to support that case study when we think about some of the guidance that has emerged recently, VNV 40 guidance, some of the documentation from FDA and others? Where are the gaps? So that's really the intent of each of these pilots is how can we come up with recommendations on how to advance further the infrastructure to support these applications. So beyond these webinars, then also this technical committee is charged with coming out at the end a technical report, which is really a synthesis of all these different case studies, a definitive set of recommendations and guidances going forward. And our hope is to have that out to the community before the end of the year.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. So I will be passing some slides while some of my colleagues are speaking, just to give a bit of context. But as Jeff was saying, these are the 10 case studies, and you will see that there are 3 cardiovascular, 1 neurotechnology, 3 musculoskeletal, 1 radiotherapy, there is a vaccine, and there is 1 in pharma manufacturing as well. So thanks a lot. So I'm going to ask now my colleague, Joyce Tate, and my colleagues, Joyce Tate and Marta Suarez, who are both co-leading Work Package 2, and they will explain us why we need to look into socio-technical aspects.
Do you want me to go first, Jeff?
Yes, please, Joyce. Yeah.
Alex, sorry. Yes, okay. Okay, I'm one of the co-leaders on Work Package 2. My background a very long time ago was in pharmaceutical chemistry, but I've since strayed quite a long way away from that. And most recently, I've been working on how we should govern innovative technologies in future, particularly when these technologies are transformative and there may not be a very clear regulatory precedent. I've been working partly with the Regulatory Horizons Council on a range of issues there, and have learned a lot about the challenges of doing this and some solutions to how it could be done in future. I think that's mainly what I will bring to the socio-technical committee, how to manage that process of making our governance systems for innovative technologies more proportionate and adaptive to the needs of the technology itself. It's a new area of thinking for regulators and for innovators, and we're going to need to work out new ways of making it happen in a way that's going to continue to deliver safety and efficacy, but to do that in a way that's more efficient than the current systems that we operate. Marta and I are currently working on a document that we'll use to set out our proposed approach to doing this, building on the work of the 5 working groups that are part of this airlock initiative. And feeding that into the other two working parties to then go higher up to working party zero. And I think we'll share that with everybody else, and we'll be looking for comments on what we're proposing and how we're proposing to make it work. But I think it's a viable timescale, particularly given all the other work being done by other parties in this, to come up with a really excellent projected approach for the further research in this area to make this work, to deliver to develop ways of delivering the potential that exists in silico clinical trials to get maximum benefits in terms of reduction in cost and speeding up in delivery and so on. I think that's a new challenge for regulators and for innovators, and helping them to work together to deliver is going to be a main part of this initiative.
So Marta is a health economist from the University of York, and together with Joyce, she will be co-leading the work package 2. So one of the things that I would like to add to what Joyce said is that work package 2 looks to an array of different angles, from regulatory governance, as Joyce was talking about, also harmonization and standards, the use of in-silico techniques as, for health systems decision making. We also have in a work package, a work group 4 that is looking at what we call risk, safety, and trust, and it's all about patient, public, and data controllers and ethics. So they are looking at, we have a reference group of public and patients and carers involved. And then finally, we have a working group that is looking into skills and workforce. What I want to stress is this is really an interdisciplinary team. We have lawyers, economists, engineers, people who work from social sciences of various kinds, plus also aspects that are people who are looking into policy, and that richness is what we believe makes the consortium quite strong. We believe that if these technologies are not adopted, is not only or primarily because of the limitation in the technologies, but is also, and to a large extent, because of the importance of creating trust and understanding, all the barriers that are, for adopting and changing the current pathways for regulations. So I assume that you are still unable to connect, but it's great that at least we can see you. And then finally, I want to bring on board Professor John Holden from the University of Manchester, who is leading on work package 3, and he will tell what it's all about.
Thanks, Alex, and yeah, pleasure to be here and see so many people online. So my name's John Holden. I'm Associate Vice President for Special Projects at the University of Manchester. So my role involves bringing together proposals for funding for large-scale, nationally significant initiatives that the university is leading, of which CEiRSI is a really important one at the moment and for the foreseeable future. So the role of the Sustainability Committee is what it says on the tin, really. Obviously, we've got a fantastic group of colleagues together who are driving forward really innovative work across the other work packages, but the funding only runs for 12 months and the countdown is already on that. So the Sustainability Committee is working through what does the model look like post January 2026. That will involve looking at the programme, the types of activities that we believe a financially sustainable UK CEiRSI could provide. So that's across policy and regulation, tech development, skills development, new standards, data and software, and so on. So really taking all the evidence that the other work packages are coming up with and putting that into a new future model for CEiRSI. Looking at the partnerships that we need to develop and create, and really firming up the role of different partners in the future model, and then crucially looking at the future funding model for that. So having a really strong understanding of future delivery costs, understanding where the benefits of that spend goes, both financial and otherwise, and then coming up with model for who do we think are going to provide the financial contributions to that future model. We're pretty sure that we'll be looking at a sustainable public-private funding model. We've started conversations with the UK government already. So UK CEiRSI is one of the proposals that the University of Manchester has put into government this spending review period, given its potentially huge contribution both to UK economic growth in the future, as it looks to firm up our position as a centre for pharmaceuticals and medical devices, innovation and manufacturing, but also its potential contribution to creating an NHS fit for the future as well, given the substantial benefits that cheaper, more effective drugs and devices can have for patients and healthcare systems. So we're speaking a lot to government, to Innovate UK, to regulators as well about their future role and contributions to UK CEiRSI. We'll also be out speaking to industry, both in terms of pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, as well as the investment community, to start to bring together that private sector contribution as well. The end result of this will be a business case for future CEiRSI, which we will pull together by the end of the year.
Thanks so much, John. This is really helpful. So just basically all of these activities will be articulated around a vertebral sort of spine, which is the awareness phase where we are now, that we are producing a number of webinars for training that they're all available, and Lara will speak a bit more where you can find them. And then there is also a number of case studies that will all be open to the whole community. So you're all welcome to join and to contribute, ask questions, and help develop this further. So as I said, we will start with the current business case and the position paper in the draft form that we have now, and produce these 4 documents, which are basically the business case, a position paper, and then 2 documents, one socio-technical report and one pilot's technical report. We will reflect on the lessons that we learned practically through those case studies. We also have a number of forums that I'm not going to delve into at the moment, and we plan at the end of the process also to have what we call an In-Silico Futures workshop, that we will explore particular areas that we are interested, like how you use these technologies for pediatrics, rare conditions, women's reproductive health, etc. Now, this is a massive consortium. We wouldn't be able to deliver all of this on our own. So, there's a number of organizations that have in multiple ways provided letters of support and engaging as we advance over the next few months. And if your organization is not there and you're interested in being involved, drop us an email and we'll look at ways in which we can connect you with areas where you might want to provide your input. So our call to action, and with this I'm going to conclude today, is we want to work together with colleagues around the world that are interested in this domain in promoting the use of in-silico technologies as a way to bet safety and possibly effectiveness as well of human testing, to avoid waiting until things become problematic, to harness this technology by urging companies and regulators to capitalize on these approaches, and also finally to adopt the use of these in-silico technologies where they can help to develop, to reduce development time or increase profitability, and of course increase the safety of the products. So with that, I'm gonna hand over to Lara.
Hi everyone. If you could just go to the next slide, please, Alex. So just a really quick overview of ways that you can engage with UK CEiRSI via the digital communication channels. So as mentioned before, we held a series of webinars. We're coming to the close of this series at the moment, but we'll be uploading all webinar recordings to YouTube. And the topics of these webinars have been quite diverse, including the landscape of computer modeling and simulation for regulatory applications. We've had technical panels discussing how CNMS can be used for regulatory purposes. But we've also had discussions by health economics and regulators. So it's been incredibly interesting series of webinars. We also have a LinkedIn hub, so this is brilliant to engage with if you want to hear updates, see any links to events, or other useful resources related to the UK CEiRSI project. And we also have a series of communication channels for the broader In-Silico UK community. So I'm just going to post a little message in the chat with all the links to these channels. And if anyone can engage with them, that'll be really helpful to keep you involved in the project.
Super. So this is just the opportunity. So we've covered the ground that we wanted to bring to you. And what we're going to do now is give the opportunity if there are questions. So there is, I can see already one, but I welcome others. One, so how can people can get involved in the project? So one of there is multiple ways. One is to get involved into one of the particular case studies that we are running. So there are groups of about 7, the minimum is 7 people in each of the case studies, where they are actually preparing each of the case studies before the presentation date that they have. So if Mike, you would have interest to do that, that's the best way would be to contact Lara and myself at the UK CEiRSI email address, and then we'll sort of have a follow-up with you depending on your skills, your interests. We can direct you to the right group. There is also a possibility to participate directly as audience during the different pilots. So the pilots will run as if they were effectively a type of webinar, and each of the pilots will be presented by the group, and then there will be an opportunity for doing questions and answers. And it would be useful there as well to if you come from a different angle, looking at this problem from a different angle than the members, it would be really great to have your perspective on what what works, what doesn't work, or if you have experience in these technologies. And then the other thing is in the case of industry or academic institutions, there is going to be mechanisms to engage as well through some of the plan notes and potentially as members. The way things are developing at the moment, it looks like the future sustainability of the center might be through a membership model. So there will be opportunities as well to become member of the institute down the line. But now is an opportunity to do that in a sort of a open format and sort of learn the value of it as well. So I'm going to wait for a couple of minutes in case that there are other questions. If you have the opportunity and you haven't already, followed our sort of LinkedIn group and the web pages, the podcast series. So all of these are different ways to get more information. The YouTube channel where we have all the seminars that we are producing as well. And this event will be also recorded. Okay. So if there are no further questions, I would like to remind you once more, if you could leave us your feedback in the link that Lara sent at the beginning with the survey. We will be keen to hear your views and any recommendations you may have, and we'll be in touch with you through that means. And thanks a lot for your attendance today. Have a great day.